Really uplifting local story out of Oregon this week. Apparently, the Democratic governor there is in a standoff with some Republican senators. Now, apparently this dust-up is over a proposed cap-and-trade bill that the Democrats are trying to pass in Oregon. And for those of you unfamiliar, cap-and-trade was a fad a few years ago that they were trying to get passed through the U.S. The idea, it's really stupid actually, is that the government will cap, hence where the cap part comes from, carbon emissions at some fixed level, and then they will create these artificial property rights to emissions, and then they will sell them to corporations. So essentially the highest bidder can emit whatever they want. And they say, ooh, this is market-based, see, because people will be able to bid up the price of emitting and stuff, and it's and it's stupid because this is not how property rights work. If they were trying to put a price on carbon emissions, because the premise here is that there's a cost when companies emit or individuals emit carbon in the economy. They say that has a cost to the rest of society. If they really wanted to do what they're saying, and that's put a price on carbon and put it in the market and try and work that into the price of goods, the proceeds from the cap and trade policy, all of this money that's made that from companies having to buy the rights to emit would not go back to the government, but rather it would go to every citizen distributed evenly, because the premise here is that carbon emissions harm everyone. And so therefore, if you're selling the right to emit, you're selling the right to inflict harm on others, then everyone should get a cut of that check. It shouldn't just go right to the government. Of course, the premise is, oh, well, everybody does get it because the government is the public, har har, which is total nonsense. They're just a gang of thieves. And even here, when they're trying to do something that at least makes some sense in theory, they don't even execute that well. Yeah, so basically the governor of Oregon wants to make a bunch of money off of companies and everyone who operates in the state. And of course, the Republicans are very mad about this because Republicans represent the rural population mostly. All the urbanites in Portland and what have you are Democratic. And as they see it, hey, this cap and trade thing will be great. It'll encourage people to take, the bus or the train, or I don't know if they have subways in Portland, but they'll take public transportation or they'll walk, instead of driving a car. This is fantastic. However, if you live in a rural area, that's not really an option. You have to drive long distances to get anywhere if you live in a rural area. And so, of course, the rural people, who tend to be poorer than people in Portland and, other urban centers where there are, lots of high-paying jobs, those people are very upset that they're going to have to pay significantly more for fuel because they're being penalized because they don't live in the urban areas. Now, the Republicans can't stop this bill. They're in the minority in both houses, and in fact, the Democrats have a supermajority. I believe 2/3. However, I think they still need, from what I was understanding in the Senate, they need 2 Republicans present to hold quorum. And there are 12 Republican senators, so what happened was 11 of those senators made a deal amongst themselves just not to show up. So the Democrats don't have quorum, and so the Senate can't really do anything. They can't pass a bill. They can't hold a vote if they don't have quorum. There aren't enough senators voting, even if it's a foregone conclusion that if the vote were held, the Democrats would win. So there is one Republican there, but these 11 guys were able to put a wrench in the whole process, and this is really the only defense they have against this bill because, the Democrats control both houses. They have the governorship. This is just the way it is. And so this really is a heroic last stand on the part of Oregon Republicans to actually do something for their constituents. It would have been very easy for these 11 senators to just say to their constituents, well, we're in the minority. You better vote harder next time, I guess, and maybe we'll be able to reduce the cap and trade because, they never abolish anything. Maybe we'll be able to reduce the burden of cap and trade, now that it's passed and blah, blah, blah. They could have played that game. They didn't. They're actually fighting to try and stop this. and doing something for the people that they represent, which is really rare among politicians. And I like that the Republicans here clearly don't give a damn about, the sanctity of the legislative process and all this nonsense, and they don't have. It's not like they're disrespecting the process of our electoral system. They're in the minority. They should just sit down and shut up because majority rules. No, they're putting their foot down and they're saying, hey, we're right and you're wrong, and that's that. We don't care if we're in the minority. We are correct. And that's exactly the attitude that any righteous man should have. It doesn't matter whether a majority of people side with you or not. In fact, it's much more important to be right when the majority is wrong. And while I'm surprised that it took something like this for Republicans to become so defiant, I would have thought that something like this wouldn't happen unless there was some kind of major gun control bill, which I haven't been following. I don't follow Oregon politics too closely, but I remember a few years ago there was a big dust-up over a proposed gun control bill there, because most of the state in Oregon is rural except for the major coasts, but the population is so overwhelmingly concentrated there that they have a very left-wing government, while the majority of the state by area is pretty right-wing. And it's actually another sidebar. Oregon politics are very interesting to me because it seems that, if I had to guess, I would say Oregon is probably the most polarized state in America, because people there, if they're politically engaged at all, they're either far left or far right. And I mean that term unironically. I don't mean far right as in like CNN would mean, where they call, neocons far right. I mean, these are actual folks who are willing to lay their lives down and die for what they believe in, on probably both sides. And perhaps these Republican senators are just an example of that. There was one senator there who, again, this is quite heroic to me. He, in response to the governor's threat to send the state police after these senators to bring them back in chains if necessary, which, by the way, to me, that's a pretty significant escalation. If you got the governor of the state saying, hey, we're going to hunt down these Republican senators who don't want us to pass this bill, we're gonna drag them onto the Senate floor, we're gonna chain them to their desks, and then we're going to hold this vote so that we have quorum. I mean, that's third world dictator stuff if I've ever heard it. I mean, if Oregon was a Latin American country with a Bolivarian president, the U.S. would probably already be invading them by now, and they certainly would be helping the militias stage a coup against this Governor Brown. But alas, this is not Venezuela. We are in the Pacific Northwest. So naturally, President Trump really probably doesn't even know that this is going on, and John Bolton certainly isn't encouraging him to try and support the militias there. However, there are, as I said, there are militias who have sprung up to support these Republican senators and are, at least in their online chat rooms, are talking about trying to defend them from the state police because, like I said, the senator by the name of Brian Boquist, who I was trying to refer to earlier, he told a reporter that if the governor sends the state police after these 11 senators, that she should send bachelors and send them heavily armed because they're not going to give in, essentially saying that, hey, we're going to fight back. We're not going to let you pass this bill. We're not going to let you have quorum. We will not be drugged before the Senate, and we will stand our ground. We're going to, do what we must to stand up for our constituents. And this, to me, is not an empty threat. Because this has happened just a couple of years ago in Oregon, where men standing up against the government were killed. In fact, it was on video. I believe I don't know if it was a body cam or what, but there was a standoff at some wildlife preserve that some local people decided to take over because they were mad at how the federal government was running things, and the feds came on the land, and the guy was standing there, and he had his hands up, and he said, hey, please don't shoot me, and they shot him and killed him. And after that, everybody gave up because they were scared, because they're like, whoa, they shot this guy and he wasn't even armed. So that scared them, they backed down. And so these senators actually do have a pretty good chance of being killed. This is actual bravery in politics. Almost never can I say that there's a brave politician in America, but these 11 men, I think they're all men, there might be a couple women, they certainly shall be counted among them. I mean, this is like Mike Gravel reading the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record type stuff. So I hope that this doesn't escalate to violence. and that the Democrats eventually back down, and that these Republicans are able to hide out for long enough for the Democrats to give up. I don't know if if they vacate their seats for long enough, or if they don't show up for long enough, if they can somehow be impeached and the governor can just reappoint new people to fill their seats, and then they'll have quorum. I don't know if that'll happen, but for now, I applaud these men, and I hope that they are able to stay safe. If you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here in the next one.